Officer Stone's voice cut through the quiet Hawthorne Estates cul-de-sac like a blade. A silver luxury sedan sat angled at the curb, surrounded by 3 patrol units forming a tactical crescent. Stone's hand hovered near his cuffs, eyes locked on the driver's door. Too expensive a car for this neighborhood. Something's off here. Before we dive in, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. I trust you have done that. Now, let's begin. Field Training Officer John stood behind his door, body cam recording, mentally drafting the report that would pad his promotion packet. This was exactly the kind of high-value deterrence stop that made careers clean, visible, effective. The driver's door opened with controlled precision. She stepped out slowly, chin high, movements deliberate. Stone expected resistance, excuses, maybe tears. Instead, she stood like a monument, shoulders squared, hands visible. Then she drew her trench coat open like a curtain being pulled back on a stage. The neighborhood froze. Full military dress uniform. Crisp blues. Service ribbons covering her chest. Combat patch. Silver eagles gleaming on her shoulders. The nameplate read, Mark. Stone's voice died in his throat. John's breath caught audibly. Officer Cole's eyes snapped to his body cam's blinking red light, then back to the woman, a silent prayer forming behind his expression. Neighbors stood on porches, phones raised, recording everything. Colonel Elva Mark's voice was measured, precise, and utterly calm. Colonel Elva Mark, United States Army. Proceed lawfully. Officers. John felt his stomach drop. Stone's hand trembled near his cuffs. Cole's shoulders lowered a fraction, his training screaming warnings his partners couldn't hear yet. This wasn't a suspect. This was someone with power they couldn't comprehend. And every second was being recorded, by neighbors, by body cams, and by forces they hadn't even considered. What happens next will end careers and rewrite policy. You won't believe how deep this goes. 3 hours earlier, Field Training Officer John Mercer started his shift exactly the way he'd planned it. Coffee in hand, promotion board checklist on his mind, and Hawthorne Estates on his patrol route. Numbers day, gentlemen, he told Stone and Cole during the morning briefing. High-value deterrence. The gates, the main drags, the places where visibility matters. People behave when they see us work. Stone nodded with barely concealed enthusiasm. He'd had 2 citizen complaints go not sustained in the past year, and he was hungry for the kind of street cred that went viral. Cole said nothing, which was his pattern. 6 years on the force had taught him that silence kept you out of internal affairs interviews. Across town, Colonel Elva Mark finished her morning PT at exactly 0600 hours. 22 years in uniform didn't allow for lazy mornings. Shower, dress uniform inspected, and hung in a garment bag. Secure phone charged and linked to the Pentagon watch floor. Her silver sedan sat in the driveway, the last major gift from her late mother, purchased with carefully saved VA survivor benefits. To Elva, it represented sacrifice, dignity, and a postal clerk's daughter who'd made colonel against every odd. To 3 officers she'd never met, it would represent something entirely different. She slid into the driver's seat, adjusted her mirrors with the precision of someone who'd run convoy security in Afghanistan, and pulled onto the road. Her calendar showed a 1400 inspection at the base, and a morning strategy brief before that. Routine, professional, unremarkable. She had no idea her route would take her through Hawthorne Estates at exactly the moment John was hunting for his clean stop. Officer Stone spotted the sedan 6 blocks into the patrol zone. Silver, expensive, tinted windows, moving through a neighborhood where the average home price hit 7 figures. Dispatch, this is Unit 7. Eyes on a vehicle that doesn't fit neighborhood profile. Silver luxury sedan. Tinted windows. Requesting backup for a compliance check. John's pulse quickened in the passenger seat. This felt right. This felt like the kind of textbook stop that got referenced in training sessions. High visibility location. Preventative policing. Community reassurance. Cole, driving the second unit, heard the call and felt his stomach tighten. Compliance check wasn't a legal standard. Doesn't fit the profile wasn't probable cause. But John was his training officer, and friction had consequences. Elva checked her rearview mirror professionally. 1 patrol car had become 2, then 3. All maintaining distance, all clearly tracking her. Her training kicked in automatically. Hands at 10 and 2, speed exactly at limit. Signals for every lane change. She'd trained soldiers for exactly this kind of moment. She understood the choreography. What she didn't understand yet was that the officers behind her had already written the script, and she was cast as the villain. John's radio crackled. All units in position, light her up. Sirens split the quiet afternoon. Elva pulled over smoothly, engine off, hands visible on the wheel. Her phone's secure line sat ready in the center console. The garment bag with her dress uniform hung in the back seat, pressed and ready for inspection. And 3 officers stepped out of their vehicles, convinced they'd just cornered someone who didn't belong. They had no idea they'd just surrounded the one person who could audit them out of existence. John made the decision in the time it took Cole to exhale. We'll sort this at the station. Professional standards can review everything in a controlled environment. Controlled. The word tasted like strategy, like damage limitation, like the kind of administrative judo that kept incidents from becoming investigations. Elva nodded once, her expression unchanged. I'll follow protocol, officer. My vehicle stays here, Tani, evidence intact. I ride with Cole. Not a question, a condition. Stone's jaw worked, but John cut him off with a look. The neighborhood was still watching. Phones were still recording. The body cams were still blinking their steady red rhythm. Cole drove in silence, Elva in the back seat, uncuffed but framed by the partition like a suspect. In the mirror, he watched her sit with perfect posture, hands folded, eyes forward. Not nervous, not angry. Waiting. Behind them, Stone rode with John, rehearsing aloud. Suspicious vehicle. High theft area. Refusal to comply. She complied with everything, Cole said quietly into the radio. Static answered him. 600 miles away, in a windowless room beneath the Pentagon, Major Lisa Fenton watched tiles bloom across a wall of screens. Body cam feeds, dash cam angles. A CAD log scrolling in real time. The Atlas 6 protocol had triggered automatically when Elva's secure phone transmitted the code phrase. Freeze the timeline, Fenton told the liaison attorney beside her. Tag every frame from initial contact forward. I want chain of custody documentation started now. The attorney, a sharp-eyed captain named Ortiz, was already typing. Scope of stop, no articulated violation. Probable cause, unestablished. Detention, ongoing, without lawful justification. He paused. They're taking her to the station? They're trying to control the narrative. Fenton zoomed in on Stone's body cam feed, caught him glancing at John, mouthing something off mic. "Pull audio enhancement on that." Ortiz nodded. "Already flagged." Elva knew this choreography. She'd trained for it in convoy discipline drills, in IED aftermath protocols, in the kind of high-stakes decision trees where every second mattered, and documentation saved lives. 0600 PT. Always, her mother's voice, postal clerk, steady. Discipline is what you do when no one's watching. The sedan had been her mother's last gift, purchased with survivor benefits saved 1 month at a time. "You earned those Eagles, baby. Drive like you own them." Elva kept her dress uniform visible for exactly this reason. Optics, disciplined behavior. A garment bag in the back seat was a conversation ender, a context provider, a shield made of cloth and shared respect, but not today. She closed her eyes briefly, pulling up the training roster she'd reviewed last Thursday. Stone, Officer M, scenario hours 40:40 completed. Sign-off date, Sunday, November 12th. The academy had been closed that Sunday for HVAC maintenance. She'd flagged it for follow-up. Now the follow-up was sitting 3 cars behind her, rehearsing a lie. The precinct bay smelled like burnt coffee and floor wax. John walked Elva past the intake desk, nodding to the desk sergeant like this was routine. "Hold her in interview 2. Professional courtesy, no booking." The sergeant frowned. "Sir, if there's no charge, there's a process, Martinez. Let it work." Behind the glass partition, the desk sergeant pulled out his phone. Within 90 seconds, his text reached a city council aide named Marcus Chen, who'd filmed the entire stop from his porch while walking his dog. Chen's reply was immediate. "That's Colonel Mark, Pentagon liaison. This is about to explode." Chen forwarded the clip to 3 people, his boss, the local ACLU chapter, and the journalist who'd broken the last police misconduct story. 2 blocks away, HOA President Patricia Emmons sat in her home office, staring at her inbox. The email thread was 3 months old. Subject line, "Unfamiliar vehicles, resident concerns." Her own words stared back at her. "We need increased patrols. These cars don't match the neighborhood profile." She'd seeded this. And now her doorbell camera had recorded the entire stop. Her hand hovered over the delete button. Then her phone rang. It was the mayor's chief of staff. In his office, Police Chief Raymond Harding read the email twice, then a 3rd time, as if repetition might change the words. Joint interoperability. Readiness grant. Compliance review. Urgent. Chief Harding, our office has been notified of an incident involving Colonel Elva Mark, Deputy Director for Defense Civil Support Integration. Colonel Mark's portfolio includes oversight of the 2-point JERG currently under review for your department. Pending resolution. All compliance certifications are frozen. Training documentation, stop procedure audits, and bias mitigation protocols will undergo immediate external review. Harding's phone rang. It was the mayor. The mayor was not happy. Ray, tell me, we didn't just blow $2.8 million on a traffic stop." Harding had no answer. Ortiz's voice cut through the Pentagon watch floor like a scalpel. "Major, I'm issuing preservation orders now. All body cam SD cards, dash cam storage, caddy entries, and radio logs are to be seized and sealed immediately. No copies, no transfers. Evidence integrity is critical." Fenton keyed her mic. "Patch me through to Riverside PD Command." In interview 2, Elva heard the precinct's main doors swing open. Heavy footsteps. Voices with federal authority. Through the two-way glass, she watched John's face drain of color as two black SUVs pulled into the bay. Lights off, engines still running. A woman in a dark suit stepped out, JAG insignia gleaming. "Colonel Mark," Elva said quietly to the empty room, "is no longer your problem. She's theirs." The door opened. Fenton stood in the frame, flanked by Ortiz and two federal marshals. "Gentlemen," she said, voice flat and final, "nobody touches those cameras." Major Fenton didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Officer Mercer, Officer Stone, Officer Cole, step back from your equipment, now." She gestured to the evidence tech beside her. "Segregate all media, body cams, dash cams, mobile data terminals. Chain of custody starts this moment." John opened his mouth. Fenton's hand went up like a traffic stop. "You will not speak. You will not confer. You will surrender your devices and wait for counsel." Stone's hand drifted toward his body cam. A federal marshal moved into his line of sight, silent as smoke. Stone's hand dropped. Captain Ortiz stepped forward, tablet glowing with legal text. His voice carried the weight of statute and consequences. "Department of Defense Instruction 3025.18. Defense support of civil authorities. When military personnel are detained or investigated by civilian law enforcement, federal cooperation protocols apply. Additionally, under State Civil Rights Code Section 52.1, pretextual stops conducted without articulable suspicion constitute unlawful detention." He looked at Elva, still standing in the interview room doorway, uniform immaculate despite the last 30 minutes. "Colonel Mark, you are not a detainee. You are a complainant and a federal liaison. These officers will address you accordingly." Elva stepped into the room, shoulders back, chin level. Not triumphant, professional. "Understood, Captain." John felt the ground tilt beneath him. Chief Harding arrived with the Professional Standards Unit commander, Lieutenant Voss, a woman whose reputation for thoroughness had ended more careers than budget cuts. She scanned the room, cataloging faces, then turned to Cole. "Officer Cole, you were present for the initial stop." Cole's throat worked. He glanced at John, then at Stone, then at the body cam now sitting in an evidence bag on the table. The red light was off, but the recording had already happened. The truth was already preserved. "Yes, ma'am." "Walk me through the justification for the stop." Silence stretched like a wire pulled too tight. "Officer Cole," Voss repeated, "what was the articulated reason for stopping Colonel Mark's vehicle?" Cole's voice came out low, steady, damning. Officer Mercer stated, and I quote, "Too expensive a car for this neighborhood. That was the justification." Stone lunged forward. "That's not—" Voss's hand snapped up. "You'll have your turn, Officer Stone. Sit." John's face went pale, then red. "That's not how—" "Context matters. We were conducting proactive deterrence in a high-value area." "You stopped a commissioned officer," Fenton interrupted, "because you didn't think she should be driving her own vehicle in a residential neighborhood. That's not deterrence. That's profiling." Ortiz opened a folder, pages crisp and damning. "Officer Stone, according to your training file, you completed 40 hours of bias mitigation scenario training, signed off by Sergeant Walsh. Final certification date, Sunday, November 12th. Stone nodded, cocky despite the walls closing in. "That's right." "Passed with honors." Ortiz turned the page toward him. "The academy was closed that Sunday for HVAC maintenance. No instructors were on site. No scenarios were run." He glanced at Elva. Colonel Mark's office flagged this discrepancy last week during a routine audit. The room stilled. Lieutenant Voss leaned forward. Sergeant Walsh signed off on training that never occurred. That's what the records show, Ortiz confirmed. PowerPoint slides and signatures. No scenario hours, no logged exercises. Fraudulent certification. Stone's bravado cracked. That's on Walsh, not me. I showed up when they told me to. You certified completion of training you didn't receive, Voss cut in, then conducted a stop that violated every protocol that training was supposed to cover. John stood abruptly. I want union representation. Right now, Voss nodded. You're entitled. Officer Stone? Stone crossed his arms, jaw set. Same. And this is harassment. We were doing our jobs. Fenton's expression didn't change. Your job isn't to invent probable cause. Cole cleared his throat. All eyes turned to him. Lieutenant Voss, he said quietly, I'd like to request an integrity review. I want my statement on record. What happened today was wrong, and I was part of it. He met John's glare without flinching. I should have stopped it. The thin blue line fractured audibly. The briefing room door opened. Chief Harding stood framed against the hallway fluorescence. The mayor's chief of staff, Daniel Cross, hovering behind him like a ghost at a funeral. Lieutenant Voss, Harding said, voice tight, you have full authority to proceed. External observers from the State Public Integrity Unit will sit in on all interviews. He looked at Fenton. Major, the department will cooperate fully with federal oversight. Cross said nothing. His knuckles were white where he gripped his phone. Ortiz's tablet chimed. He glanced at the screen, then at Elva. Colonel, you're requested at City Hall Rotunda at 1900 hours for a public briefing. The watch floor wants you front and center. Elva nodded once, her face unreadable. Understood. She turned toward the door, then paused, looking back at John and Stone. Gentlemen, competence isn't optional. It's measurable. You're about to learn the cost of ignoring that. Chief Harding swallowed hard as Elva walked past him, uniform still crisp, bearing still perfect. The reckoning had only just begun. The City Hall Rotunda at 1900 hours looked less like a press conference and more like a tribunal. Camera lights painted the marble columns in stark white. Rows of folding chairs held community leaders, clergy, training directors, conspicuously few politicians. Colonel Elva Mark entered from the side door, flanked by Dr. Rashad Coleman, director of the Regional Police Training Institute, and Chaplain Sarah Vance, who'd counseled families through 3 officer-involved shootings in the past 2 years. No campaign consultants, no spin doctors, just competence and credibility. Elva stepped to the podium, adjusted the microphone once, and began without preamble. At approximately 15:20 hours today, I was stopped by 3 officers of the Riverside Police Department while driving through Hawthorne Estates. The stated justification, according to officer testimony now on record, was that I was driving too expensive a car for this neighborhood. She let that settle, her voice calm and surgical. A lawful traffic stop requires reasonable suspicion of a violation or probable cause of criminal activity. Neither existed. What did exist was an assumption, one that cost the department its credibility and may cost it federal funding. Murmurs rippled through the room. Cameras zoomed tighter. I serve as Deputy Director for Defense Civil Support Integration. My office oversees the Joint Interoperability Readiness Grant, $2.8 million allocated to this department for joint training, equipment upgrades, and operational coordination. Those funds are not entitlements. They are conditional. Dr. Coleman stepped forward, placing a document on the podium. Elva didn't look down. She knew every line. Effective immediately, participation in federal interoperability programs will require verifiable compliance with the following standards. 1. Bias mitigation training must include scenario hours logged, observed, and certified by independent evaluators. PowerPoint slides and signature sheets are not training. 2. Randomized audit rides with external civilian observers will be conducted quarterly. Officers will not know when they're being evaluated. 3. Supervisor override protocols. When a stop deviates from lawful scope, a watch commander must intervene in real time. Silence is no longer safety. 4. Quarterly stop data dashboards, published online, with full demographic breakdowns. Transparency is not punishment. It's verification. She paused, scanning the room. Chaplain Vance stood with hands folded, eyes steady on the press corps. Interoperability is trust measured, not just gear purchased. Today, that trust was broken. Tomorrow, we rebuild it with metrics. Elva reached into her uniform pocket and withdrew a small memorial pin, a caduceus entwined with dog tags. She held it up so the cameras could capture it. During today's stop, this pin was knocked from my garment bag onto the street. It belonged to Specialist Adrienne Cole, a combat medic I mentored in Kandahar. She died pulling 2 soldiers from a burning vehicle in 2019. I wear this pin to remember that service is sacrifice, not swagger. Her voice didn't waver, but the room felt the weight. She believed in discipline, in protocol, in the idea that authority without accountability is just power misused. She pinned it carefully to her uniform, just above her ribbons. The click of the clasp echoed in the silence. We owe her, and every person who trusts us with authority, better than what happened today. Before the applause could start, a phone buzzed loudly in the press section. A reporter glanced at the screen, stood abruptly, and read aloud. Statement from the Police Officers Union. Today's incident is being mischaracterized for political optics. Our officers followed protocol and are being scapegoated. Marcus Chen. The city council aide who'd filmed the stop stood in the back row. He raised his phone, screen facing forward. Here's the video. No edits. Full stop. Judge the protocol yourselves. He hit play. The room watched in real time. Stone's aggression, John's framing language, the rough handling of Elva's garment bag, the memorial pin hitting asphalt. The union spokesperson, sitting 3 rows back, closed his laptop. Lieutenant Voss stepped to the edge of the rotunda, phone pressed to her ear. She nodded twice, ended the call, and walked directly to Chief Harding, who stood near the exit looking like a man at his own sentencing. She spoke quietly, but the microphones caught fragments. Grand jury referral confirmed, Stone, retaliatory detention, evidence tampering. Harding closed his eyes briefly, then stepped forward into the light. His voice was hoarse but clear. Effective immediately, the Riverside Police Department will accept a consent decree-style monitoring agreement with the State Public Integrity Unit and federal observers. We will comply with all conditions outlined by Colonel Mark. We will publish stop data quarterly, and we will rebuild the trust we broke today. He turned toward Elva, shoulders sagging. Colonel, we failed you. We failed this community. That ends now. Elva nodded once, her expression unchanged. Professional. Not forgiving. Verifying. Across town, a university provost hit send on an email suspending the department's criminal justice internship program pending compliance review. A tactical equipment vendor flagged the account for contract hold. A neighboring county's sheriff quietly pulled out of a joint training exercise. The consequences weren't theoretical. They were already moving. And in the rotunda, under lights that made every truth visible, Colonel Elva Mark stood at the podium, not as a victim, but as the architect of accountability. "Competence," she said quietly into the microphone, "is courage you can measure." The cameras captured everything. The administrative hearing room smelled like old carpet and consequences. Lieutenant Voss read the findings without inflection, but each word landed like a gavel strike. Officer John Mercer, untruthfulness in official reporting, failure to supervise, conduct unbecoming. The board finds credible evidence that Officer Mercer initiated a pretextual stop based on racial profiling, then attempted to reframe the incident after federal oversight was triggered. She looked up briefly. Field training status revoked. Termination recommended. John sat rigid, union attorney beside him, saying nothing. His promotion packet, the one he'd been building all year, sat in a folder he'd never open again. Officer Marcus Stone, referred to the state attorney for criminal prosecution on charges of retaliatory detention, civil rights violations, and evidence tampering. Additionally, falsification of training records, receiving certification for scenario hours, never completed. Stone's jaw worked, but no words came. The memorial pin, his dropped pin moment, as the press had labeled it, had become the image that defined him. Not the uniform he wore, but the disrespect he'd shown. Officer Daniel Cole, 15-day suspension without pay, mandatory retraining, and reassignment pending psychological evaluation. Voss's tone softened fractionally. Officer Cole's cooperation with the integrity review is noted. Upon successful completion of retraining, he will be considered for reinstatement and potential assignment as a field training officer under revised protocols. Cole exhaled slowly. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a second chance, the kind you earned by telling the truth when silence was easier. 3 weeks later, Chief Harding stood before the city council and signed the monitoring agreement. A federal observer would embed with the department for 18 months. Stop data dashboards went live the next morning. Every stop, every outcome, every demographic marker. Updated weekly and visible to anyone with an internet connection. The first audit ride happened on a Tuesday. A civilian observer, clipboard in hand, rode shotgun while a sergeant worked a morning patrol. No warnings. No scripts, just transparency, measured in real time. The department didn't collapse. It adapted. In a Pentagon conference room 4 months later, Colonel Elva Mark stood at the head of a table surrounded by training directors, grant administrators, and policy attorneys from 6 federal agencies. The Joint Doctrine Update ties funding to verifiable outcomes, she said, advancing a slide that showed a flowchart of compliance checkpoints. Bias mitigation training requires logged scenario hours with independent observation. Supervisor override protocols must be activated when stops deviate from scope. Stop data must be public and updated quarterly. A Navy captain raised his hand. What about agencies that can't meet the standards immediately? They receive technical assistance and a compliance timeline, Elva replied. But funding doesn't flow until metrics are verified. We're not defunding police. We're funding competence. Within 6 months, equipment vendors began writing compliance clauses into their lease agreements. If a department lost its federal certification, the tactical gear went back to the warehouse. Regional task forces aligned their standards. The mark case became shorthand for the cost of assumption without evidence. At the Regional Police Training Institute, the mark case was now Module 7, taught between use of force continuum and crisis de-escalation. Instructors didn't frame it as a scandal. They framed it as a workflow correction. What happens when training is falsified? When supervisors don't intervene? When assumptions replace evidence? A cadet raised his hand during the final exam review. Question 12. What ends a bad stop fastest? The instructor nodded. Read your options. The cadet scanned the page. A. Union representation. B. Supervisor override plus transparent metrics. C. Better public relations. D. Increased training hours. Which did you circle? B. Supervisor override plus transparent metrics. Correct. Explain why. The cadet looked up. Because problems you can measure, you can fix. Problems you hide just get worse. The instructor smiled. Remember that when you're 6 years in, and silence feels safer than friction. Early morning, 6 months after the stop. Colonel Elva Mark jogged her usual route, past Hawthorne Estates, past the cul-de-sac, where 3 officers had surrounded her car. A patrol unit rolled slowly past, then pulled ahead and stopped. The window lowered. Officer Cole, now wearing a field training officer's insignia, nodded respectfully. Morning, Colonel. Morning, Officer Cole. He gestured to the empty street. We've got you. Safe route. Elva nodded, then continued her run. Not vindication, just space. Earned space. Across town, new recruits filed into a lecture hall. Elva stood at the front in dress uniform, the memorial pin glinting just above her ribbons. Competence, she began, her voice steady and clear, is courage you can measure. It's not what you say when the cameras are on. It's what you do when no one's watching, and what you're willing to fix when you get it wrong. She touched the pin gently, remembering Specialist Adrian Cole, who'd run toward fire when others ran away. Service is sacrifice. Authority without accountability is just power misused. You'll wear a badge, carry a weapon, and make decisions that change lives. The question isn't whether you'll make mistakes. The question is whether you'll have the courage to correct them. The recruits sat straighter. Elva looked out at the rows of faces, some confident, some uncertain, all listening. Proceed lawfully, she said. Always. The room was silent, but the lesson was loud. Competence, after all, was something you could measure. And now, finally, they would.